Hello and welcome to the lecture for part one of chapter one, which was the nature of business. This corresponds to sections 1.1 to 1.5 in your online textbook. So in this section, I'm going to talk about some common definitions that relate to businesses and organizations in general that you'll work for one day. I'll talk about different types of organizations, talk about factors of production, and then a little bit about the business environment. And then in part two, I'll talk about economic systems and microeconomics, the difference between those two. So some common definitions. So a business is any organization that strives to earn a profit, and I'll talk more about what profit is in a minute, by providing goods and services to customers. Okay, that's a very broad definition of what a business is. All of you are going to work in one of three different kinds of organizations. Either a business, which is defined here, you'll work for some branch of the government, federal, state, or local, or you'll work for a not-for-profit, and I'll talk about that next as well. So your job is going to be in one of those three large categories, and the majority of you will be in a business. And again, the purpose of a business is to earn a profit. They do that by solving a problem for customers. No business is ever successful unless it solves a problem for a customer. It provides them with a product or service that they've come to rely upon, or it offers them convenience that they desire, or something like that. So revenue is what a business earns when it provides those goods and services to a customer. So if your business is a taco truck, the money that people pay you for your tacos is your revenue. Another word for that is sales. The cost are all the expenses that are incurred in producing those revenues. So again, if you have a taco truck, your costs include maintenance on the truck, gas for the truck, insurance for the truck, the wages of people that help you prepare the tacos in the truck, all the ingredients for the tacos, hamburger meat, taco shells, all that kind of stuff. Those are all of the expenses that are incurred in trying to earn the revenue. So your profit is revenue minus cost. So can a business operate forever if its costs are greater than its revenue? No, it really can't. You could do that for a little while as you try to build a base of customers, but in the long run, you need to earn a profit. Your revenue needs to be greater than your cost in order for you to be viable and continue in business. Risk is directly related to profit. So the businesses that have a greater degree of risk, like say you're going to invent something new that's never existed before, there's a lot of risk involved in that. There's also a high potential for profit in that. The other category of organizations that you'll work for that I want to talk about, we're not going to really address governmental jobs too much in this class, but not-for-profits, they're very similar to a business. If you walked into one, you might not know if it's a not-for-profit or if it's a regular business. Not-for-profits, though, they exist to achieve a goal other than earning a profit. So their goal might be to educate young children, might be to help people battle their addiction to drugs. It might be to help people that are homeless find a place to live. It could be a whole variety of different kinds of goals that drive them. Everything else about their organization is really the same as a business. They set goals, they have to hire people and incur expenses and all of those kinds of things. And more important, they have to bring in money. So not-for-profits have to bring in as much money, at least as much money, as they need to cover their expenses. So they do that sometimes through charging customers, and some kinds of nonprofits they can earn a little bit that way, but it's primarily through donations. So people that believe in that goal, that say that's a worthy goal, I agree that homeless people should have a place to live, here's $100 or whatever the case is, that's their revenue in effect. That's the money that comes in to cover all of their expenses. Now, can they exist if they don't bring in enough donations to cover their expenses? They could for a short amount of time, maybe if they have some reserves, but they can't do it forever. They also can receive large donations in the form of grants, sometimes from branches of government, sometimes from philanthropic organizations. They have a different kind of competition. There might be other not-for-profits trying to solve the same problem. That's a type of competition. And sometimes they face competition from for-profit businesses that are addressing the same issue. So different factors of production. Now we're talking about physical products. So all physical products are made up of some kind of materials that started out as a natural resource. So it doesn't matter if you're talking about a wooden table and chairs for your kitchen, if that's what the company is producing. Well, at some point those were trees, and somebody had to cut a tree down and turn it into lumber and machine it so that you could make a table and chairs out of it. So all commodities start out in a natural state where some extraction business has to either cut it down or dig it up. That's where it all starts from. And that's the supply chain. You've probably heard a lot about that in the news. Supply chains are how you get the product from where it's grown or raised or dug up to where it is in its finished state. It's all the links in that chain. Companies also have the use of labor, so human resources, employees in their company that operate the machines, drive the forklifts, make decisions, provide for payroll, do the marketing. All of those kinds of jobs in a company are necessary to convert those natural resources into something that's useful. Capital in this definition doesn't refer to money, it refers to the things that money can buy. So money in and of itself is not a productive asset. Money in a bank doesn't produce anything. Once you buy a machine or a computer or a building or whatever the case is, then you can start to employ that capital in an effort to create products or services for customers. Another category is entrepreneurship, and we'll talk about that later in this course. We'll take a whole chapter on that because I think it's a very interesting subject, and many of you may want to be an entrepreneur one day, start a business. So entrepreneurship is somebody that has an idea or a vision about a problem that can be solved for customers, and they are willing and able to take the risk to see that through. That's entrepreneurship. And then a fifth category has been added recently, which is knowledge. So the things that you have in your head from your past experience and your education can be employed as a factor of production as well. All organizations operate in both an internal and external environment. And I just realized that this slide is, maybe it's mislabeled. I think it would say, no, I'm not going to worry about it at this point. So I'll talk a little bit about internal. So those are internal environment is the things that a business owner can control, or the leader of an organization can control. Who do we buy our products from? Who do we hire and who don't we hire? How do we reduce costs? What do we choose to sell? What do we not choose to sell? Who do we sell it to? All of those decisions can be made inside the company. External is everything outside the company that's out of your control. So we'll talk a little bit about external environments here. So one external environment issue is unemployment. So the category would be economic influences on a business. So unemployment is the number of people, or the percentage of people that are actively looking for work that don't have a job. So that's the unemployment rate. So if your unemployment is at, I think right now it's at 3.9% nationally, that means out of 100 people, 3.9 of them are currently actively looking for a job. Now the influence that has on an organization is this: the higher the unemployment rate is, the more people there are looking for a job, the greater latitude you have to replace people within your company. If you feel like somebody's not doing a good enough job, you have a greater ability to terminate that person's employment and find somebody to replace them. When the unemployment rate is very low, that can be very difficult to do. It can be very difficult to find a new person. As an example, right now there's a shortage of truck drivers. The unemployment rate among truck drivers is very, very low. So that means if you have a truck driver that you don't think is doing a very good job, your ability to replace that person is limited. Okay. In those cases, your focus, instead of replacing employees, should be on training and retaining the employees that you do have. You might have to improve your pay, improve the benefits you offer your employees, things like that. Inflation is the rate at which prices are increasing in the economy. That can affect a business because what I pay for my goods, I have to turn around and raise my prices to my customer if my costs are going up. As an example, if the minimum wage rate goes up, that means my cost for having employees converting raw materials into finished products has gone up. I have a choice now. I could either raise my prices so I stay even with where I have been, or I could leave my prices the same and lose some ground in that way. So inflation affects all businesses. Supply and demand definitely affects businesses. So all of us saw this when COVID first hit, and it was really difficult to find masks, and the masks you could find were expensive. That's the case now with rapid tests for COVID. It's very difficult to find them, and when you can find them, they're fairly expensive. So that's the supply. When there is limited supply and large demand, prices will increase. When there is plenty of supply and limited demand, prices come down. So again, I've kind of addressed the two red lines there about that. The other thing I want to talk about in the external environment is the political and legal influences. We've all certainly seen a really good example of that in the last couple of years as our state government implemented laws and actions that they took to limit the spread of COVID. And at one point that required restaurants and gyms and places like that, movie theaters, to close completely. Okay, that's a very significant influence on those businesses, of course. Some counties, if you've been to a restaurant in King County lately, you have to show proof of vaccination in order to be able to get into the restaurant. Now, I'm not saying anything good or bad about that, just that that's an example of a government activity that has a direct influence on businesses. The other kind of political legal influence that affects businesses are things that cause businesses' costs to go up. So minimum wage is an example. Import tariffs are an example. Again, if the government says that minimum wage should go up, which a lot of people think is a good thing, somebody that works 40 hours should be able to support themselves. But then again, that causes the cost to go up for a business, which causes them to raise their prices. There are a variety of government agencies that provide oversight that also affect businesses. The Food and Drug Administration deals with the safety of food. State health departments deal with the safety of food as well. And I often, people that complain about excessive government oversight, I'll ask them if they would be willing to eat in a restaurant if there was no state health department doing inspections. And most people wouldn't risk it. So it's good to have some government oversight when it exists to protect the public. So the FDA does that. The SEC is the Security and Exchange Commission. That protects the public's interest in terms of investments. They make sure that there are not stocks that are being offered for sale that are based on fraud and things like that. The Federal Trade Commission deals with truth in advertising, among other things. So they make sure that companies don't make claims that they can't back up. OSHA is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. They deal with rules that exist to protect the health and safety of workers. So the fact that you have to have eye protection when you're operating equipment so that you don't lose an eye on the job, that sort of thing. They're the organization that puts those rules in place, and then they inspect businesses and fine them if they violate those rules. So that gives a little bit of a feel for how political and government activity can affect businesses. So the next category, and we talked a little bit about this coronavirus shutdowns, how that's affected businesses, and some businesses have benefited from that, like Zoom. Their stock price has gone through the roof because of this, and other businesses like restaurants have suffered. So anytime there's change, so there are winners and losers. So the external environment, that also deals with demographics. So as the age of the population in the US changes, that's going to have an effect on business. If you're producing products for young people and there's a dip in the amount of babies that are being born each year, then that's going to affect your business. If you're making toys for 5-year-olds and people's held off on having children because of the coronavirus and COVID issues, then that happened last year as an example. So 4 years from now, there are going to be fewer 5-year-olds. So if you're selling toys or books for 5-year-olds, you can anticipate having a reduction in demand for your product down the road. That influences your business. The same thing with changes in gender, changes in race and ethnicity. By 2040, the United States is going to be a majority minority country. And how does that affect businesses? And then location. As people move around the country, there are some areas that lose population, some areas that gain population, and that correlates to numbers of customers. So all of these changes in demographics, which is constantly happening in this country, that changes markets, meaning the people that you sell to, and it affects labor pools, the people that you can hire to work in your business. So lastly, I'll talk about social influences. So those are the attitudes, values, ethics, lifestyles that people engage in. If people choose to be healthier, then they're going to eat less fast food and they'll go to the gym more, or they'll buy running shoes, or whatever the case is. So as those kinds of trends affect society, it's going to affect the businesses that sell to that society. People's determinations about what the right balance between work and life is, that's often correlates to the money that you can make. So if you're willing to work 7 days a week, you can make a lot of money. You're not going to have a lot of time for friends or hobbies or vacations or things like that. Some people are okay with that. They say, sign me up, I want that big paycheck. Other people have a very firm opinion about having time to themselves to pursue hobbies and things like that. And it's just important that you have a clear-eyed view of the company that you're going to work for, what their requirements are, and how that meshes with what your preferences are. So one of the things to think about is, how has social media changed business? So how businesses had to adapt to that. So I'll stop the lecture here and I will pick up where I leave off in the second part of the lecture for this first chapter. Thank you for your attention. I'll talk to you in the second part.